She was the daughter they had sidelined, the voice they silenced, the leader they underestimated. But when her father betrayed her and handed everything to her unqualified brother, she didn't crumble. She fought back. What followed was a ruthless, corporate war fueled by betrayal, ambition, and the fire of a woman who refused to be erased. This isn't just a story about power. It's about what happens when the underdog becomes the lion and builds a legacy so powerful even her enemies are forced to bow. Ready to witness the rise of a queen in a kingdom built to keep her out? This is Lisa Harper's story, and it will leave you breathless. 12 years. That's how long I had poured my life into Harper & Company. I wasn't just the CEO. I was the architect of its modern success. When my father retired, he handed me the reins, and I didn't just maintain the company. I transformed it, expanded it, made it thrive in ways he never imagined. But legacy, as I would learn, isn't always respected, even when you build it yourself. The first sign of betrayal came quietly. A missed call from my brother, Ethan. Strange. We hadn't spoken in months. Then a second call, then a third. I ignored them all. Something in my gut told me this wasn't a courtesy call. By the fourth call, I answered. "Lisa," Ethan said, voice smooth but tight. "We need to talk." "About what?" I asked, already knowing. "Dad's not happy. He doesn't like the direction the company's going." I laughed. A short, bitter sound. "You mean the direction that's brought record profits for the last 8 quarters? He thinks it's time for a new vision." That was rich. New vision, coming from a man who had never held a leadership role outside of the family. "Name." "Let me guess," I said. "He thinks you're the new vision?" Silence. "I'll take that as a yes." I hung up. The next morning, the board meeting felt different. Tense. Whispers died when I entered the room. Eyes darted away. My instincts were screaming now. I sat at the head of the table and opened my laptop. "Before we begin," I said, "I think we all know why we're here." No one spoke. For 12 years under my leadership, we've seen a 300% increase in revenue and expanded into 6 new markets. I turned to the CFO, Paul. "Do we have a single financial indicator suggesting this company is in trouble under my leadership?" Paul hesitated, then shook his head. "No. Projections show another 20% growth in the next quarter." I nodded. "So let's be honest about what's happening here." I leaned forward. "My father and brother aren't upset because the company is struggling. They're upset because they expected me to step aside and let Ethan take over. Regardless of qualifications, regardless of results." The room was silent. Then I dropped the real bomb. "I also know that some of you have been contacted in the last 24 hours. Offered incentives to push for my resignation." I tilted my head slightly. "If anyone here would like to disclose those conversations now, this is your chance." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Then, after a long pause, one of the senior executives cleared his throat. "I received a call," he admitted, "from your father. He said he was considering making an official appeal to the board." I nodded, unsurprised. "And did he offer anything in return for your support?" A pause. Then a slow nod. "There it is," I exhaled, standing up. "My father built this company," I said. "I won't discredit that, but I took it further than he ever could have, and I will not allow him to manipulate it from the outside." I let my voice drop. Controlled. Dangerous. If he wants a fight, he'll get one. I gathered my papers, looking each executive in the eye. "If anyone here believes my father and brother deserve control, now is the time to make your move." Silence. No one moved. Good. I turned and walked out, my head held high. This wasn't just about keeping my company. This was about making sure they never thought they could take it from me again. That night, I made my call. not to a board member, not to an investor, to the media. By morning, the business section of every major news outlet had the same headline: Power Shift at Harper & Co. Lisa Harper outmaneuvers family in boardroom battle. I had made my move. Now it was their turn, and I was waiting. The morning after my story hit the press, my inbox exploded. Emails, missed calls, messages from journalists, investors, and board members. Some were supportive, others cautious, but most had the same question: is it true? I let them wait. I knew the game my father was playing. He had spent decades perfecting the art of public perception. He knew that reputation held weight in business. If he couldn't defeat me in the boardroom, he would undermine me in the public eye. And that was exactly what he was trying to do. By noon, the first counterattack arrived. A press release, neatly crafted, carefully worded, but filled with subtle lies. Harper & Company has always been a family-run business. We are saddened by recent developments, but remain committed to upholding the values that built this company. Leadership changes are inevitable, and we hope to transition smoothly as we move forward. It was a quiet knife to the back, not direct, not aggressive. But the message was clear. Lisa is reckless. Lisa is unstable. Lisa is not a team player. I wasn't surprised. I was, however, furious. I sat in my office watching the news as analysts debated my leadership. Was Lisa Harper too aggressive in her takeover? Will her lack of cooperation hurt the company long term? Can she recover from this PR disaster? They talked as if I weren't watching, as if I weren't already planning my next move. Because if my father and Ethan wanted a public war, I was going to give them one, but not the way they expected. I didn't release a statement. I didn't call a press conference. Instead, I made one phone call. To an old friend, an investigative journalist. I have something for you, I said. But you'll need to move fast. An hour later, I sent over the documents. Emails, financial reports, internal records, evidence of questionable business practices under my father's leadership, ones I had spent the last decade quietly cleaning up. The story broke within 24 hours. Behind the scenes at Harper & Company, a legacy of hidden debts and financial cover-ups. The article was brutal. It praised my leadership for fixing the company's financial health. It exposed years of mismanagement. It outlined the mess I had inherited and how I had saved Harper & Company from collapse. And just like that, the narrative shifted. The board stopped doubting me. The investors stopped hesitating. And my father, he had nowhere to hide. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was him. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Lisa," he said. His voice was tight, strained. "We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair. "Do we?" Silence. Then finally, a sigh. "You didn't have to do that." I let out a quiet laugh. "Neither did you." "This company was supposed to be a legacy," he said. "For the family, for both of you." I felt a familiar pang. A tiny, foolish part of me had once wanted that too. But not anymore. "Dad," I said quietly, "if you wanted me to protect the legacy, you should have trusted me with it. Instead, you tried to take it from me." Another long silence. Then he asked, almost reluctantly, "What happens now?" I exhaled slowly. "Now? I make sure you can never touch this company again." The war was over. My father had lost. Ethan had disappeared, silent since the article dropped. And me? I had won. But as I sat in my office staring out at the skyline of the city I helped build, I felt nothing. No triumph. No joy. Just emptiness. I had spent 12 years fighting for Harper & Company, building it, protecting it, strengthening it, And now that I had secured my position, I realized the cost had been far greater than I ever expected. Because while I had won, I had lost my family. The next day, I walked into the office as if nothing had changed, but everyone knew the truth. The whispers had stopped. The doubt had faded. I was no longer just Lisa Harper, CEO. I was Lisa Harper, the woman who had outmaneuvered her father and brother, and won. Some respected me for it, some feared me for it, and some still waited for me to fall. I let them wait. At noon, my father and I met in the conference room for what would be our final discussion. He looked tired, older, as if the weight of what had happened had finally settled on his shoulders. I waited for him to speak first. When he finally did, his voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "I'm retiring," he said simply, "effective immediately." I didn't react. I had expected this. "I'll sell my remaining shares," he continued. "Keep a small percentage as an investor, but I won't be involved anymore." I studied him carefully. "And Ethan?" His jaw tightened. "He's gone," my father admitted. "Took the buyout. He won't be back." A part of me had known it would end this way. Ethan had never been strong enough to fight his own battles. Once it was clear he had lost, he did what he always did. He ran. Still, hearing it out loud made something inside me ache. Not regret, not guilt, just the finality of it all. I nodded. "Understood." My father exhaled, rubbing his temple. Then, after a long pause, he said something I never expected. "I underestimated you." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing I'd ever get. And strangely, I realized I didn't need it anymore. 3 months after my father's quiet exit, Harper & Company was thriving. Profits were up, morale had stabilized. Our new marketing campaign, free from the stale vision of the past, had rebranded us as a bold, modern firm led by someone who wasn't afraid to challenge tradition. But beneath the surface, I wasn't celebrating, because no matter how successful I became, something still didn't feel right. Every time I passed the corner office that used to be my father's, now empty and locked, I felt a strange hollowness settle in my chest. Like I'd inherited a kingdom, only to realize the crown came with too many thorns. And despite the power, the recognition, and the vindication, I was alone. One Friday evening, as I stayed late finalizing a partnership with a Scandinavian tech firm, I got an unexpected call, blocked number. I almost declined, but something made me answer. "Lisa." It was Ethan. I froze. "Why are you calling?" I asked coldly. "I wanted to talk," he said, his voice quieter than I remembered. "No agenda, no schemes, just talk." I didn't respond. So he kept going. "I messed up," he admitted. "Dad made me believe I was ready, that I deserved it, that you were just power hungry. And I wanted to believe him, because if you were the problem, then I didn't have to face the truth." "And what's the truth?" I asked. "That I was never you." The words surprised me. Not because they were true, but because I didn't think he'd ever say them out loud. He sighed. "You built this company. You carried it. I just showed up in a suit and expected to be handed the throne." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city lights beyond the glass. "You didn't just show up, Ethan. You tried to erase me." There was a long pause. "I know," he said softly. "And I'm sorry." Silence filled the space between us. Heavy, uncomfortable, honest. "Why now?" I finally asked. "Because I saw the article in Forbes," he admitted. "They called you the most formidable CEO in the city. And all I could think was, you deserve it. You always did." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something closure, maybe. When we hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, absorbing the strange, bittersweet end to a relationship that had once defined so much of my life. Because the war was over, and all that was left now was rebuilding. Weeks passed. Spring melted into summer. I found myself spending less time in the office and more time doing something I hadn't done in years. Living, dinners with old friends, weekend hikes, late-night books I never finished. It was like learning to breathe again after holding my breath for over a decade. One Saturday, while browsing a local bookstore, I stumbled across a biography of my father. It had been ghostwritten, years ago, back when he was considered a titan of the industry. I flipped through it idly, amused by the selective storytelling. Chapter 11 was titled, Preparing the Next Generation. I almost laughed out loud. He had prepared us, all right, for war. I put the book back on the shelf, because the truth was, I didn't need to be part of his story anymore. I was writing my own. 2 months later, the board nominated me for Executive of the Year at a National Business Leadership Summit. At first, I hesitated. Awards had never interested me. They felt symbolic, superficial, but my team insisted. This is your legacy now, my assistant told me. Not your father's, not Ethan's, yours. And maybe, for the first time, I believed her. The night of the summit, I stood backstage in a sleek navy dress, heels clicking softly against the floor, waiting for my name to be called. When it was, the applause was thunderous, not because they admired me, but because they respected me. As I stepped up to the podium, the lights blinding and the cameras flashing, I took a deep breath and looked out at the crowd. Then I spoke. Legacy, I began, isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build when no one believes in you. A hush fell across the room. I was told I didn't belong, that I was too emotional, too ambitious, and too difficult to work with. I was told the company wasn't ready for someone like me. I paused, letting the silence settle. But the truth is, they weren't ready for change. And change is uncomfortable. It forces us to confront the ways we've failed, the ways we've ignored talent, and the ways we've protected power, instead of earning it. Heads nodded in the audience. I didn't win because I fought dirty, I continued. I won because I knew who I was. And I never let them convince me otherwise. When I stepped down, I didn't smile for the cameras. I didn't need to. Because, for the first time in years, I felt whole. That night, I returned to my apartment, heels in one hand, award in the other, and stared at the skyline from my balcony. This city had watched me fight, watched me rise, watched me bleed, but it had also witnessed my transformation from a daughter in the shadows to the woman who redefined an empire. As I sipped a glass of wine, I thought about my father, about Ethan, about every boardroom glare, every whispered doubt, every time I'd been told to wait my turn. And I smiled, because I hadn't just survived. I had built something bigger than all of them, a legacy that wasn't inherited, but earned. A company that no longer feared the future, but shaped it, and a name that no longer lived in someone else's shadow. Harper, not his. Mine.